Good morning and welcome to the Digital Shift in Dialogue, British and German perspectives on openness and the digital transformation in research libraries. This is a joint initiative by RLUK and VDB, Verein Deutscher Bibliothekarinnen und Bibliothekare, the Association of German Librarians. So welcome also on behalf of VDB. I'm Ewald Brahms from Hildesheim University, and as a board member, I take care of our international relations. Today, our third online event will focus on openness and library systems. We will look at two case studies of libraries using open source technologies, using and developing open source software. I'm delighted that 130 plus colleagues registered for this session. So we have a broad audience today with colleagues from the UK and from Germany. Let me say a few words in German now and then I'll get back to English. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, es freut mich sehr, dass Sie sich heute Vormittag Zeit nehmen für unsere Veranstaltung und damit Zeit für den Austausch mit unseren britischen Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Einige von Ihnen waren vielleicht schon bei der Auftaktveranstaltung in Bremen dabei oder auch bei unserer Session am letzten Freitag. Und Sie haben da schon erste Eindrücke gewinnen können von unserer gemeinsamen VDB RLUK-Initiative. Zögern Sie nachher bitte nicht, Fragen zu stellen. Direkt nach den einzelnen Präsentationen spezifische Fragen oder dann darüber hinaus allgemeinere Fragen am Ende. Sie können das auch gerne auf Deutsch tun. Thorsten Reimer und ich werden dann übersetzen. Und beim letzten Mal hat sich schon gezeigt, das funktioniert ganz gut. Dear colleagues, Thorsten and I agreed that our introductions should be short. So, Thorsten, please continue.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ewald. My name is Thorsten Reimer. I work at the British Library and I chair the Digital Shift Working Group for RLUK. You're probably broadly aware of the context of this work, but it's a fairly ambitious sort of 10-year initiative to help the research libraries manage the sort of ever-increasing, ever more important digital challenges. And when we called this digital shift, we were quite clear that we didn't want to have a simplistic moving from physical analog to digital, but rather finding good ways to incorporate physical, analog, and digital in a sort of forward-looking way. I think that's a critical part. We don't believe one will work without the other. And together, it affects all elements of libraries, be it our collections, our services, the people, the way how we work with partners. So it's fairly broad and ambitious. And because it's so broad and ambitious and there's so many challenges, we said from the start that RLUK is not able to sort of benefit most from this shift on our own. We need to work broadly with other libraries across countries. And the Digital Shift Forum overall has been really international, but we thought it would be particularly useful to look at a bit more detailed experiences in the UK and in Germany. So this is the dialogue that Ewald mentioned earlier on. And I think from a British perspective, speaking both for our UK members, libraries broadly and the British Library, I think especially after Brexit, the international collaborations are even more important for us. And in that spirit, I think we now want to run today and also possibly some follow-on events. So if you like today, if you have ideas, please do contact us and then we'll see how we can factor them into the wider program. And with that, I'll hand over to Matt.
Thank you, Thorsten and Ewald. My name is Matt Greenhall and I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Research Libraries UK. And it's a real pleasure to be working with VDB, Thorsten, Ewald and our German colleagues around today's event. So thank you for all being with us. A few pieces of housekeeping. So microphones have been muted as a default when you've entered this meeting. There will be plenty of time at various points in today's session to ask questions to our speakers and to join in a discussion. And at that point, we would ask for you to raise your hand, and you can then unmute your microphone. Although microphones are currently muted, we would love to see you. It will be great to put faces to names, so please do feel free to have your cameras activated throughout. If you do have your cameras activated, though, please be aware that we are recording this session today, and it will be made freely available on the RLUK website. So if you do turn your camera on, you may be featured in that recording. You can make comments or pose a question at any stage during today's session, and please do so via a chat at the bottom of the screen, or by raising your hand when it comes to a question and answer section of today's event. So there's two ways of asking a question: via chat at the bottom of the screen, or by raising your hand and asking your question verbally during some of the question and answer section of today's event. There will also be an opportunity for discussion online on Twitter, and the hashtag for today's session is hashtag RLUK DSF, and the DSF stands for Digital Shift Forum, which, as Torsten mentioned, this is a series that RLUK have been running since October, and it's a real pleasure to be running today's event and our previous event with VDB. I think those are the final points from me. So on that note, I will hand over to Ewald, who will introduce today's first speaker. So over to you, Ewald.
It's a great pleasure to briefly introduce my colleague Kirstin Kemner-Heek. She is the head of the local library systems department at the Service Center of the Common Library Network GBV, Gemeinsamer Bibliotheksverbund at Göttingen, Lower Saxony. And she will discuss the potentials of the open source FOLIO library management system. Perhaps just a few words on GBV and the network, especially for our UK colleagues. GBV is one of our 6 regional library networks in Germany. Research libraries and public libraries from 7 states, Bundesländer, and from the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation are members of GBV. And GBV is highly membership driven. That means there are several GBV committees, task forces, interest groups, etc., where libraries from many GBV members, librarians from many GBV members work together with the colleagues from the GBV Service Center at Göttingen. And we are very happy with this cooperation, not only here in Hildesheim, but also in so many other libraries. We think that's working quite well, and that's really getting us ahead. And it will also get us ahead in this FOLIO context. But of course, Kirstin from the Service Center knows all the details. So I will hand over to her now. And the title of her presentation is Introducing FOLIO and Open Source Management, Library Management System. Kirstin.
Yes, thank you, Ewald, for this nice introduction. And hello, everybody from Göttingen. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to talk to my British colleagues and to my German colleagues as well. And I would like to introduce to you FOLIO. It's an open source library management system, and the GBV has decided to pick it as its next library system. So I hopefully can move ahead. Yeah. So a first introduction, who we are. We are situated in Lower Saxony in Göttingen, and as Eva just said, we are one of 6 regional library services. This is our headquarters, that's the State and University Library in Göttingen. And here you see Germany is divided in 6 library networks. We are in the northeast, and we are working as a service provider. So we are serving around 72 academic libraries and around 400 research libraries of really various sizes, from very small ones to very big ones. And we are running our regional union catalog. It's an OCLC product called CBS. You are maybe familiar with it in Great Britain. We do this since 1993. and it's including our interlibrary loan. And according to this, right now we are running an LBS from the same company, and we are already hosting this service in the VZG for most of them. We have three sites who are running local, and we are offering software as a service for smaller libraries. So we think we are well prepared to introduce FOLIO to our libraries as well as service. We are in this project from the very beginning, and we have live sites now. Last year, we are hosting the platform for our network. We have now 2 live libraries, and I saw already people from W here in this forum, and 4 started. One of those is Hildesheim, and we already have a good waiting list. So we are on our way, starting with FOLIO ERM first. That's the electronic resource management part of it. And we are heading for full implementation as well. And to make it complete, of course, we are offering discovery and other digital services as well. So that's us. And the FOLIO project. As I said, it already started in 2016, and it is two-sided. FOLIO is a software, so that's maybe something people are very interested in its functional scope and its technical architecture. But FOLIO is a community as well. So nothing happens without this community, and I would like to point out how this all works together. We are now in release mode. So we have official releases. The last one is from May. And to make it a little bit interesting, they have flower names. So right now we are in Iris. The next one will be golden. No, the next one is juniper. So, and in this context, the VZG started their first own development projects embedded in the community and in the software with FOLIO electronic resource management 2 years after the official project start in 2018. And what is FOLIO aiming for? Its goal is to develop a library service platform to serve as library management system, but not just that. Of course, the goal is to let libraries migrate from their recent library systems to a new one. But of course, the intent is to offer more and more services as needed in future. It is open source, and it is, of course, sustainable, innovative, flexible, and enhanceable. I'm always saying that. It's a little bit the marketing mode, but it is real, and I want to point that out. The target group was clearly at the beginning mainly academic and research libraries, but now we already have a very big public library on board, like the Shanghai Public Library has gone live a few weeks before, and other special institutions. So the target group is broadening. And we all do this under the roof of the Open Library Foundation that secures our code as safe haven and has some projects assembled under that roof, like FOLIO. There are others like the GoKB project, Project Reshare, WooFind, and the ARC project. And each of those projects have their own governance structure. FOLIO at the moment has a brand new governance structure introduced this year, and mainly based on a membership model. So who's interested in those details may want to click on that links. I think the slides are shared afterwards. And the main difference to the older model is now we have elected committees. We have a community council, which is responsible for strategy, finances, the membership, and to the connection to the OLF, that's FOLIO SMLLC. We have a product council responsible for the functionality, for the roadmap, and to guard and guide the special interest groups, and a technical council for the technical architecture and the development guidelines. We want to make our decision based on lazy consensus. So if you don't speak up, things that are proposed are taken into realization. If you have questions, just put them in the chat, please. I try to come up after them later. So how we work, we are divided in a more functional part and more technical part, and we try to bring those two together as good as possible by having special interest groups and the one or other subgroup. There you find the subject matter experts, and as you see lined up here, they try to cover more or less every part of a local library system, and they are reaching out to other areas like SysOps, DevOps, the implementers, and we are now having with App Interaction a group that tries to cross over all parts of the system and integrating the technical questions as well. We have technical leads group where the lead developers and technical architects are meeting and reach out then to the technical council, and the development is guided by the product owners who have responsibilities for areas of development or assigned apps. And if I'm talking of apps, it's a word we are using for modules like acquisition or resource access, electronic resource management. Sometimes those areas have more than one app, but some just have one app. So app is module, like in the old word. And we are working with the development cycle. So the special interest groups are speccing out the requirements, the functional requirements. They are guided by a user experience designer. So we are trying to think from the user experience, not so much from the functional requirements, and bring this together. Then the product owners are bringing this up in front of the developers, speccing out the technical requirements, the technical specifications. The developer teams are picking up their tasks from a Jira database, developing, and then the cycle goes back through the product owners to the SIGs. And if it's good, it's published. If it needs refinement, it goes back in the same circle. So we are trying to develop small pieces, publish quickly so that you can see the progress accordingly. And the architecture is mainly divided into 3 layers. The top layer is the user interface. It's built on a software piece called Stripes by React and Redux driven. And in the middle or underneath the top layer, you have the apps with their module character like catalog, electronic resources, circulation, acquisition, and so on. That's some kind of core apps. And of course, you can add other apps, connection to your RPT system or your library learning and your learning management system. And everything is guided by the folio gateway called Okapi, which is managing everything. There you have the layer where the multi-tenancy is situated, where the access to the databases is. And this is a picture how we do this in GBV. We are running a platform in a Kubernetes environment. So on top, you have the browser access to the system. The browser goes inside, and you have the Kubernetes platform underneath. Everything is guarded by a load balancer. So if you have a lot of action on the system, it is scaling the load in the system. You have the access to Stripes and Okapi. As I said before, Stripes is running the user interface, Okapi is running the platform and the database access. And each of those are bundled in containers. So if you need more power, another container is uploaded. Some technical persons can explain this, I think, a lot more deeply, but this is a broad overview how this software works. Goal is to achieve horizontal scalability and load balancing, very important if you work on a software, on a platform with very many libraries on. We need high availability. We definitely need multi-tenancy ability. And as it's all based on a microservice architecture and strictly connecting everything through APIs, the goal is to have the freedom of choice regarding the programming language. Independent development groups shall be able to develop their own apps and integrate them more or less seamlessly into the whole environment. And libraries shall be able to pick up the modules of choice they want to choose. And even if I would like to line out today more or less the potential of FOLIO, I want to show at least one picture how it looks like to give access to what we are talking about. So you see here the user interface, search column, short results, and a full result screen. And here you see how many apps are already available. So you have a full-blown ERM context modules in various, you can use this in various ways. You have the circulation ready, you have a course module, course reserves module, data export and import, of course. You have an e-usage app built by our colleagues in Leipzig, finance and invoices, very important. You have an inventory, that's the local catalog. You can add external sources, and you have an organizations app, and all the others are the acquisitions apps. You have search, you have requests, and of course you have the apps you need to administer your software, settings and users. That's a very, very short introduction. And what is the potential of FOLIO? I think one of the first things I would like to bring up here is the freedom of choice of the business model. You can pick from choosing an SaaS cloud service from a commercial service provider. Then hard and software up in the cloud by that provider. You don't need to run anything by yourself. This is right now offered, for example, by EBSCO and Index Data, and I just picked those as examples. I'm sure there are others outside there, or will be in future. You can do a very traditional local implementation. You do everything by yourself in your institution, or you can pick additional services from commercial service providers, like knowledge integration from Sheffield or Index Data or EBSCO. These are the main ones at the moment. As well, more are to come. And maybe you want to do it like the GBV is doing it. In the headquarter is a public service-based service provider. We are offering a hosting service or a full SaaS service. So the cloud sits in a public domain, public service domain, and we are using additional services from commercial service providers, like I already said. And you have, as I already introduced, the free choice of your service. You can do simply hosting. You can do hosting and outsource the release management and the testing. You can do a module-based individual service. So some of our libraries are running the hardware in the VZG, but they try to maintain their software as good as they can on their own. So they are responsible for their settings. They are running their own system in a browser-based control, and they are very active in the community and bringing forward development and their requirements. Or you do full service SaaS, so just using Folio out of the box system and as out of the box system, and yeah, you are not so active maybe because you're a small library or you don't have the resources. You can use this as full implementation, or you just implement modules. And you can choose, for example, in the ERM context, you can choose different data to use different databases with different workflows attached. And I'm sure we are right now not at the end because Folio is still in development. And touching on the data management options, right now you are able to connect, for example, union catalogs as metadata sources. That's what we do. And you have different knowledge bases for e-resource management, commercial ones like EBSCO's KB or 360-degree manager, or you're picking a cooperative like GoKB. And I'm sure there are many more out there. And what are good reasons for Folio? First of all, it has the approach to integrate in higher education structures. So have a seamless connection to your e-learning modules, to your ERP, integrating your IDM management systems, and so on. You have the option to implement step by step. So we think it's less friction, it's less risk. You can guide your own implementation path as you want to do it. The system's architecture is strictly open. The platform is communicating with their modules, and the modules from module to module are communicating strictly through APIs, and it's the same way outside to third-party systems. The system is enhanceable. You can do local apps, extra services as you need, and you can bring back your development to the community and integrate it into the core platform. And of course, we all hope that the system will support future requirements we may not know today. But one thing, of course, is the APC APC app for article processing charge. And one other reason is Folio is open. I mean, those arguments here are more or less for every open source software valid. We have open APIs, we are non-proprietary, no vendor lock-in. We are cooperative. The participation and development is transparent. We have a safe haven for our code under the Open Library Foundation, which is a very big advantage. And those important things like data security, data safety, and data ownership lead to data sovereignty. And that is, I think, unique in regard to other options you have right now in the local library systems market. And you can want to host your system, so you can host your platform in a public service environment. And from a German standpoint, I'm part of a very big network. We have already proven that library networks can do a lot together in collaboration and on a regional basis, but now in an international cooperation as well. And if I'm talking of Folio, of course, I'm convinced, but I don't want to leave out the risks. In an environment that is community driven, you always need to make sure that you really get the version that you need for your own implementation. So are all requirements you have defined and prioritized really realized in time as you need it? Do you have your funding ready? Do you have the necessary stuff in place with the necessary ability? Like you need product owners, project managers, leadership persons, developers. And often you find out, oh, it's not so easy. Does the planned software really comes up with the necessary scope and quality? And of course, you need a lot more effort in coordination and communication if you are working in a big community all over the globe with different cultural behaviors, with different time zones, different ways to approach challenges. And in the end, you need to secure the sustainable development and its continuation over time. So not just finish one app, but maintain it. And from that standpoint, the community is really the key here. We have a cooperative development and as a very nice wording from libraries for libraries. And of course, our libraries have the knowledge, the functional and technical knowledge to do this. We know exactly what future requirements we might have and what we need right now. So we need to be aware that FOLIO is time and resource consuming. It needs people and money, and it needs leadership. And therefore, we need a stable and responsible community to secure all those necessities. And the positive effect is we can do this in cooperation with commercial partners as well. They often bring the necessary financial and some management support. And because they have an outcome-oriented target, I don't say that libraries don't have that, but they have a stronger view on the return of investment. And that's had helped us a lot in the past and right now to get ready for what we wanted to get ready. So in summary, that FOLIO supports this idea of openness is already well introduced in higher education in combination with open data, open science, and open source is part of it. And as an academic or research library, you're normally used to work in cooperation on regional base, on international base. And for example, the German Research Foundation, which gives a lot of money to all libraries, all the ministries, they are expecting today open access, open source, and openness as one of the foundations. What they are like open access data, open data, or open science. We are reaching for transparency in regard to functional scope, sustainability, and funding. And we want that libraries can drive their innovational potential themselves. So it comes out of their own needs. And that brings us to the goal of FOLIO, that it's more than just the library management system. It shall support the future needs as well. And the libraries shall be independent from commercial interests to realize what they really need. And therefore, I'm already at my last slide to show up that FOLIO is still in development. Yes, it is not ready. It does not have a maturity of other systems which are already in the market. But FOLIO is already live, and it already provides a broad functionality. And if you would like to see much more of those, please just ping me. It's possible to have a look. The development and implementation process, of course, is a challenge to do all this in parallel, but it's a chance as well, because you can influence what you are developing and what you are implementing in the end. And you have a self-determined and sustainable access to the innovations you need. You have the option to cooperate in public-private partnerships, which was very helpful And of course, library networks, single institutions, consortia of all style can cooperate. And yeah, I would like to close what I have to say with a nice sentence that FOLIO is providing libraries a sustainable development options for required functionality and services in an innovative, self-contained and consolidated environment. That's the goal. And the more people are participating, I hope the more successful FOLIO can be. And if you want to learn more, here are some links you can follow. For the German colleagues, we have a German website, so where all our publications are listed. There are a few English presentations as well, so please have a look. And thank you so much. That's from me. And do you have questions?
Thank you, Kirstin. Thank you for this really good condensed presentation with a lot of information and also with the message. I see in the chat that there is one question concerning, I would say, scalability. The question is FOLIO already usable by large academic libraries? Could they implement FOLIO modules and work with it already? Or is it still in a state of development where many things still need to be done? Kirstin.
That is a question that I can only answer in a very differentiated way, because it always depends what that library needs. I can say something like Cornell Library, which is definitely not a small library, went live with FOLIO, I think, a few weeks ahead, before. So yes, it can be used. On the other hand, a lot is still in development. So each library that is intending to use FOLIO needs to do some kind of gap analysis, what is missing. But the good thing is, normally an implementation process is a process. So during that process, you can say, okay, I need this, that, or this requirement. For Germany, for example, we need to implement an access to interlibrary loan with this, which is very special for German libraries. And I think for British ones too. And then you can say, okay, I'm giving a development contract to a service provider and develop this during my implementation process. That's what we did. We outsourced the development to connect our union catalog with an online update mechanism to FOLIO for our GBV network libraries, and every library which is using CBS as regional union catalog can reuse that service. So that is one approach. The other approach you can take is don't implement fully. For the GBV, for example, our recent library system is fine. It has a very broad scope. We are running it now for over 20 years, but we don't have an electronic resource management system integrated. That is something our libraries really, really need. So we decided, first thing, we are part of the development of this piece of software. And now we are introducing this piece of software first in parallel. And then we plan to migrate step by step to the other modules when they are maturing. So it is not so easy to say it is ready. You really need to look very carefully for your own institution or for your own network.
Can I maybe ask you quick follow-on questions specifically to that? One context where this has sort of come up in my professional environment recently was cataloging. And the view was, and I quote someone who said, well, this sounds really good, but I understand FOLIO has no cataloging module at all, which in that sort of radical statement surprised me a little bit, especially considering, well, I wanted to say cataloging is very crucial for libraries. That's probably slightly biased from the National Library's perspective that has quite diverse needs, and others is probably less so. But as you sort of said nuanced answer is needed. Could you say a little bit more about where Folio currently is in terms of meeting cataloging needs, in particular from the view of larger libraries?
Oh, here again, I can say it depends. For German libraries, for example, it is not a problem because the large academic libraries are doing their cataloging in a union catalog, a regional union catalog. And so every metadata piece can be directly, in case of GBV, in real time transferred to the inventory of Folio, and you can already maintain all your items and holdings there. That is not a problem. If you really want to do your full cataloging work in Folio, as far as I hear this from the American colleagues, there is still need. They are developing right now the quick mark cataloging app, but there is still work to be done. And I have to admit, because we really definitely have no problem there, we don't look at it so closely. So here I would say, please reach out to an American library. I mean, a lot of them are cataloging in WorldCat and copy and paste their catalog data into Folio as well. And there's already an API working. Cornell is using that API. So there are a lot of different approaches how to tackle this. And yeah, a library that's interested needs to analyze their own environment first and then look up what Folio provides.
Thank you. That was very
one
helpful.
more question before we continue. One question addresses finances. And the question is, how was your procurement and financing of Folio handled? Did you have institutional support for open source? And that touches on finances. It also touches on strategic decisions.
Yeah, maybe we can answer that question even together. The GBV or the VZG in GBV is in the lucky position that we have a strong network behind us. So it was a decision that we made up a project in different phases. So we first started with an evaluation phase. That was very poorly funded, I have to admit. So we did a lot out of our own strength, and we collected some funding from our membership libraries. And after we found out that Folio is an opportunity, we reached out to our funding partners. These are mainly, so GBV is mainly funded by the ministries of the regional countries of where we are members of. That's mostly the north and the east of Germany, 7 countries, and a few independent institutions like the Prussian Cultural Heritage, for example. And there now for this year, for 2021, we have for the first time an official budget. And from that budget, we are financing extra stuff, development. So we are able to outsource development we are needing and where no one else is interested or we haven't found partners so far. We try to partner with other institutions. For example, the University Library of Leipzig has access to European membership financing from the EU. And we are partnering in developing some APIs for ERM, like the connection to LASER. That's another way to manage electronic resources, mainly in regard to consortia. And so there are different ways. And other libraries, as far as I know, are budgeting their development out of their own budget. So yeah, of course, money is always the question. Folio is not cheap. It is, you need to bring up the same resources as if you're buying a commercial system. The costs occur somewhere else. That's maybe a good conclusion.
Yeah, perhaps we can touch on that issue later on, because of course that includes management decisions, and that includes deciding which road you want to go and want to follow. Buy a system off the shelf, look for financing, or do you want to participate in developing a system? And if you want to do that, FOLIO might be an option. I'm a little biased because we are part of the FOLIO community, at least to a certain extent, but that makes me stop here and hand over to Torsten.
Thank you. I sort of see we don't have any immediate other questions, so in the interest of time, I think we'll then move on to the next talk, and we'll have a chance to ask sort of broader questions after the talk. So I'll very briefly introduce William Nixon. He's Assistant Director for Academic Engagement and Digital at the University of Glasgow Library. He's also very active in the RLUK community and a range of open communities, such as Spark, and he will say a little bit more about this. And crucially, he's been a very active, long-standing participant in the open repositories community. That's, I think, where we first met. And because it's very warm in Scotland today, you get an uncharacteristic view, because William is also known, at least to me, as one of the people with probably one of the most dynamic and best sense of dress and ties. But unfortunately, I think the hot weather is preventing us from seeing at least one of William's ties. So the introduction, I think, over to you, and from ties into open repositories.
Mute. Thank you very much, Torsten. Yes, I am sans tie, and guten Morgen to our German colleagues. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this session this morning. Hold on a second, let me just resume my share. Start that again, just so that I'm looking at the camera. Yeah, thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and thank you, Kirstin, for that great session on FOLIO. That was very, very inspiring. So I want to talk a little bit about our institutional repository, which is called Enlighten at the University of Glasgow, and our focus on open. And I'd like to say a thank you. I know a number of the team are on this morning, but also to my colleagues Valerie McCutcheon, Nikki D, and our team locally in Glasgow who support this. So thank you very much to them. So I want to touch on Open at Glasgow, why we're using Eprints and our focus on open source, a snapshot around some of our work and publications, and little bit of catalyzing around a discussion about beyond Glasgow and open infrastructure and open source. So first of all, I want to apologize to William Gibson for mangling this quote slightly, but I would argue that the open future is already here, but it's actually very unevenly distributed. There are pockets of good practice in open. There are elements of both open science, open research, open scholarship, the exciting developments going on around the kind of the library management systems and library services platforms, but some of that is very unevenly distributed. So we want to kind of touch on some of that. So I'm going to focus on open at Glasgow. Open is incredibly important at Glasgow. It's been something that we have been working with for the last kind of 20 plus years. I'm going to focus on our Eprints platform, but other platforms are available. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about how we use that platform as a current research information system. And unusually, I think, amongst our peers, we don't have a commercial current research information system. So the vision for the University of Glasgow is to be a world-changing university. And our inventions, interventions, innovations have helped to shape the social, cultural, and economic prosperity of our city, country, and indeed, we would argue, civilization itself. We've been changing that world since 1451, and we are just getting started. And our commitment to open access, open research, open source is critical to that purpose in transforming lives through ideas and action. And I think at the moment that's even more critical as we all come through this pandemic. So when I was putting this presentation together, it gave me an opportunity to actually take a step back and reflect. And we are coming up on our 20th anniversary of engagement with open repositories from back in the heady days of 2001, where Eprints 1.0 or even pre 1.0 was actually released. So we are very clearly an ePrint shop. We've historically been an ePrints shop, an institution for many of those years. But that led into, I think, what was an incredibly important event for UK institutions with funding from JISC around the focus on access to institutional repositories, the FAIR program, which really kind of funded a lot of the development around repositories in the UK from 2002 to 2005. It saw some of the initial work around what was Romeo at the time, some work around how we could start to use our repositories for a range of different content. And we were fortunate to be successful in part of that program, and we enabled the funding from that to enable us to transition into a service which we called Enlighten from 2006. And ironically, for a talk about repositories, we don't use the word repository a lot at the university. It's not a word that actually means very much. So we have actually badged our range of services around this notion of enlighten and enlightenment. However, it was really kind of the last 10 years where it's really kind of taken off in terms of some further JISC funding with a project called Enrich, where we really started to pull together staff identifiers and research funding and research kind of project data. So that actually enabled us to really supercharge the repository and to give it that Chris-like functionality so that we could start to reuse that data in lots of different places. And one of the fundamental principles of our open repository system and our open access approach is, providing that data once to us, and then we seek to make that as interoperable as possible. And now, as we're here in kind of 2021, the UK is just going through a major research assessment exercise for all of our higher education institutions, and our institutional repository was critical in both the selection of the research outputs for this program, but also how we actually delivered it. So why Eprints and open source? And what we've got just on the screen here is an example of an open education resources repository, again powered by Eprints at Glasgow, called EdShare. So there's a number of reasons. There is that flexibility and configuration. We've been able to do quite a lot of customization. We've been able to be fairly nimble around taking advantage of new pieces of sort of functionality, being able to plug into new services. For example, development of an altmetric plugin with the Eprints team, developing things like the credit, sort of the contributor role taxonomy, so that we can start to look at how we can assign roles to those of those. Being able to have that configurability to integrate it with a wide range of core university systems and external services. And I think it's important as well that this open source also comes with open collaboration, both across the university and the wider community. We've built up local expertise around this. We've looked at how we can repurpose and reuse some of this content back into the wider community. But I think, as Kirstin had noted as well with the LMS, there are risks, there are challenges around that sustainable development, whether it's at an individual level for individual repositories or that wider infrastructure around that we really want to look and take ownership of around open scholarship and open research. We have used our repository, again, with some CRIS-like functionality to manage all of our open access processes. We were able to configure and use that in-house to bring together all of our various different processes. The aim here of this project was to consolidate and manage that information to both increase the efficiency of recording and reporting of it, but also to save us time and reduce the errors. And we've certainly found that that has been the case. And again, in the same way that we bring together the research outputs data, again, it's marrying that up with these other pieces of information that we need to provide. So let's talk a little bit about where this sits in terms of Glasgow, and this was quite an old paper on the road to enlightenment as we actually developed our services, and it's part of an open network. So Enlighten is the overarching name, but we have used the Eprints open source software to spin out support for a wide range of critical infrastructure for supporting our research at Glasgow. So that includes publications, it includes research and data, that includes our open access theses repository, our open education resources, and also starting to capture knowledge exchange and impact data as well. So looking at ways in which we can develop and support that. And obviously we're part of that much wider community with the connections, plugins to ORCID and the interactivity around there. And discovery is absolutely critical. The material which goes into Enlighten is then harvested, it's made available through Base, it's made available through Core. Google and Google Scholar are fairly aggressive in the way in which it indexes and captures our data. So raising that discovery profile and element has been absolutely critical for us as well. But I want to say just a couple of words about how we've also developed some current research information system functionality. And as I say, back in the last 10 years, the critical element of that has been really linking together the flow of funder and project data and also staff identifiers, being able to link that material together. That has been absolutely critical and has enabled us to then reuse this data in a variety of different systems, look at how we have then configured it. As I've indicated as well, we've used that to manage open access compliance, also for reporting back to funders. We've done some work as well with research fish, but also looking at how we actually can just report the overarching work that we've done, how we can embed this in staff profiles. And our repository is the canonical sort of repository for staff identifiers like ORCID and Scopus author IDs, which can then be reused in other university systems. So we've continued to evolve that. I've mentioned credit briefly. So on the screen here, you can see an example of a couple of the roles which have been applied through credit. So you have the creator roles. So you've got those, and we've really been working to sort of make those available, but also that interoperability between vendors like ResearchFish, where we need to provide some reporting and so on. What became incredibly important as well, so this is just an example of how we have collaboratively worked with our web team, where we've developed and enhanced some of our functionality to push more of that data out into our staff profiles. So we were able to synthesize and pull together elements of kind of professional activities and recognition for staff that's captured in Esteem, that's captured as Esteem data and reused from the publications repository, but also using our new knowledge exchange and impact repository, being able to push out examples of publicly available data, whether that's working group involvement, engagement with practitioners, schools and other types of activity. And these feed into that kind of broader environment piece and the narrative as well, that publications don't start and end with the preprint and the publication. There's a more holistic view around all of that activity and the impact which that has, and ways in which we can use some of our open source tools to capture and reuse and share that kind of material. So just a couple of words about our publications repository. So this is the kind of key open source repository that we have. And I think for us, the open source elements and the technical support that we have enabled us to really plug this into kind of other core university systems. So we've been able to have it work with our identity vault, with our data vault, working with our planning and academic and intelligence team around responsible metrics, capturing citation data and so on, our institutional content management system for web profiles and web pages, our research funding system. And the integration in all of these systems has meant that actually our service is now embedded into performance and development reviews, how we deliver and support the university's research output, key performance indicators. I've mentioned the research excellence framework, the staff profiles, and also the research reporting. But I think it's also important as well to know that, like the open source LMS, an open source repository or an open source CRIS is not without cost. We have a local Eprints developer who has enabled us to do some of these local configurations and some of this local development, those implementations around things like credit and some of that functionality to make our repository more CRIS-like. We have a maintenance contract with one of the kind of Eprints vendors, so that vendor partnership. And we have very strong support and engagement from our institutional IT and server team, who support things like the identity management service, the use of virtual machine technology, the infrastructure that this all sits upon. So that's very much kind of Glasgow. But I wanted just in the last couple of minutes just to sort of shift gears and look beyond Glasgow and open for open scholarship and open repositories, as Thorsten has mentioned very kindly. Yeah, absolutely. I've been very involved with open repositories, which is a fantastic forum and conference every year around all of this. I'm not going to talk about all of these bodies, but I'm going to just pull out a couple of different pieces of work. UCOR in the UK, which is an association of kind of professional repository managers, has also done some kind of work as well. It's been doing some governance work as well with the REOX metadata application profile, and the beta version of version 3 of that has just been released. So it's great to see that kind of work continuing to develop. But beyond that, there are bodies like Invest in Open and Spark Europe. Invest in Open is focused on improving funding and resourcing, and I think this comment here is really critical for us as research libraries. Open community infrastructure is necessary for research to thrive. So it's around sort of where we can continue to support and maintain some of that work. Spark Europe as well has been working with IOI, looking at some work around scoping the open science infrastructure, looking at some of the lessons learned, looking at the need for open source, also diversifying kind of fundraising, looking at kind of sustainability issues around some of these. You've got SCOS, which is the Coalition of Open Science Leaders. So that includes LIBER, Spark Europe, CALL in Australia, and it's about securing some of that vital infrastructure and has supported and funded services like the Directory of Open Access Journals and also the Sherpa Romeo service, and invites kind of non-commercial open access services to apply for coordinated funding. The Confederation of Open Access Repositories has been very important around supporting that next generation repositories approach, but also acting as a global voice for the repository community. They've just launched a strategy to look at modernizing the global repository network. This is going to run from July to September. We've just had the very first kind of meeting where a number of countries were all represented and providing updates around all of that material. So I come back to my opening quote that the open future is already here. Pockets of it are already here, and it is unevenly distributed. And I think one of the challenges for us all, whether it is library management systems, whether it is repositories, CRISs, and also those wider services, is how we can enable and support that to ensure it is evenly distributed for all. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, William, for that talk. I just wanted to say we are now sort of having about another 20 minutes or so for discussion. And in particular, unfortunately, Kirstin needs to go a few minutes early. So if any of you have specific questions for her, then it's probably good if you bring them up earlier in the chat. I would maybe like to sort of, as I don't see anyone having their hand up immediately, come up, sort of ask both of you a question, and that has to do, I think, with uptake and support of open. In the library community, I would say, at least in my perception, there is generally much goodwill towards open. And that's probably also partly true for sort of universities and larger research organizations. But certainly in my experience, I find when you want to get a university to buy into a new system, then open might not be the #1 thing on the mind of the university president or provost. And they'll rather ask questions like, well, total cost of ownership, or they might ask, is the support network strong enough? Because we know there's this company who promised us all the following SLAs, and can your open source community match this, or can the service providers that work there match that? So it'd be interesting to get a view from both of you on sort of your experience, either at your own organizations or in partner networks. What convinces people outside of libraries and in leadership positions to invest in open, or to at least be open and interested?
You can see us rushing to answer that, Kirstin. So in terms of us at Glasgow, I would comment that I think one of the things, the phrase "proof is in the pudding" springs to mind insofar as what we are continuing to demonstrate is that through our commitment to open source and our kind of Eprints platform and the ongoing evolution and development of that platform to basically achieve a number of the research goals or a number of the questions which are asked of the repository is something that we are able to kind of turn around and do and deliver, so that it's about being able to further demonstrate that value that we can provide by satisfying the kind of the institutional needs for that kind of research management support.
Yeah, and maybe, yeah, I think you picked up a very important argument: show and convince. I mean, I have to admit, in the very beginning of FOLIO, for example, it was difficult to convince people that it is a good investment. And of course, the risks have been high, but the risks are lowering as far as we go in the process. And I think it is absolutely crucial that now libraries are live with the system, that we can show the system. And from my network's perspective, I dare to say we invested on the right spot. We invested in the electronic resource management system. And the feedback we are now receiving, and this is very, very fresh. And I see my colleague Jamo Schrader here. We had our last training on this yesterday. And the feedback is really positive from the colleagues, and it shows that we did something that has not been there until now. And I think that is the convincing point. Use it, make it better, and then all the other things fell in place. And of course, this is not alone the base for a strategic decision. So finding allies early, look for stable funding, look for companies you can work with trustfully is absolutely important, because of course I can just talk from the German environment. It is very difficult for us to find skilled developers who stay with us for a longer time. So we need to rely on companies we can really work with, we can partner with, who understand what we want, and who have reasonable pricing, to be very honest. So you need to find a good balance, and you need to find your way. Do I want to be responsible for what I want and what I want to develop? Or do I want to buy out of the box? We all know how our commercial companies, we work with what they promise, how they work. I can choose, is that what I want? Do I want this advantages, or do I want other advantages? So it is really not just a decision based on functionality. It's a decision based on other aspects like own responsibility, access to your own data, data sovereignty, and ability to do independently development what my institution needs, and cooperate with others. So do I want to do cooperation? Have I got the abilities to do I have the stuff to do that? And if I can say yes to all of this, I think that is a good opportunity.
Yeah, you touched on, sorry, Ewald, yes?
Yeah. We are talking about decision-making processes on different levels. The one level is in the libraries. Are we willing in the library to work together with others and cooperate and bring in our knowledge and have others participate in using our knowledge? Another level is where do we get the funding from, of course. And another also very important level is how can we manage to convince our chancellors, presidents, boards of regions that this is a good road, that open access, open source products are the answer to a lot of questions that have been raised concerning data security, data sovereignty. For instance, during the past month, almost a year, at least 2 German universities were attacked by hackers so that they were no longer able to use their computer systems for anything. So they had to get back to almost, well, I'm exaggerating, or in many cases, they had to get back to paper and pencil. And another aspect, one of the major German funding agencies, the German Science Foundation, recently released a paper on data tracking in academia, showing and discussing what huge international publishing houses are able to do in terms of tracking, finding out what sources are really being used and which not. So there are different levels, and at least for us at Hildesheim University, it's important that our library system fits in, and William, you also mentioned that, fits in within the core university IT systems. And I assume that my colleagues, both in the UK and in Germany, have made already similar experiences or are in the same or similar decision-making processes.
Yeah, and I think we've been very fortunate in that, or perhaps by design as well. Our IT colleagues have been, very supportive around our approach with, with Eprints and, with the migration work, working in collaboration with, in terms of the kind of the Eprints team as well for kind of migration of any of the software, making sure that we've continued to resize and rescope the servers and, and where all of that is actually sitting. I think for us, the investment as well in some local staffing had made a big difference. When we moved into research data management, we created a new team of staff, and when we did that, one of those staff was a developer who's actually kind of based in the library, and we've been very fortunate that that developer has kind of picked up and run with some of the kind of local configuration and the work that we've wanted to do around our kind of Eprints repository as well. So I think having that investment, or being able to kind of demonstrate as well that that's been critical to any of the sort of the configuration work, or the work that was highlighting where we could draw together some of those kind of disparate open access reporting pieces of data and improve some of that reporting, but also look at how we can sort of push much more of that data out, or have it integrate with systems like the performance review system or kind of the ID management, have been incredibly valuable for us.
Thank you, William. I'd like to sort of just quickly jump in because I'm aware that Kirstin has to go very swiftly. There's one question in particular in the chat that I think links sort of elements of both of your talks together, and it's from Chris, who's asked, the library services platform and repositories are 2 pillars of library service provision and open source development. How might these be linked to facilitate cross-service integration? Yeah,
I already read that question, and that these are things that came to my mind when I listened to William. How can we connect those initiatives? And as FOLIO was very much concentrating in the last years to build an LMS system where people can migrate from their old systems to, I think in the next year or so, we are ready to concentrate on those extra add-ons and look out for new developments. So there are two options in my views. On one hand, if there are already open source initiatives out there, don't develop it again in FOLIO, but try to connect those pieces in a sensible way together through APIs, because now we have those APIs, building APIs so that both systems can exist in their special requirements environment side by side and in the best way interact more or less seamless. That is one vision. Of course, some other things that have not yet been developed can be developed in FOLIO now, when the community is now in that state and the software and that maturity that we can approach those new challenges, let's say it like this. Yeah, FOLIO is young, so open to everything, and join us, bring those initiatives in, and I'm happy to continue that talk with Glasgow to see what we can do here.
So speaking for Glasgow, we're very happy to have those conversations. And I think actually, I think that's a great question, Chris. And I think some of those APIs and some of that interoperability are kind of clearly elements of that. I was struck as well, we have a discovery system that sits over our library management system and kind of our repository service. And again, it harvests the content from our repository and from the library management system, so that that becomes kind of a more unified discovery system. And I think as well, there's definitely opportunities to look at some connections there, but I'm also mindful that I guess to some extent we're unusual in that we spun out a number of kind of slightly more specialist kind of repositories, because in some respects what we needed to provide for research data wasn't quite what we needed to provide for publications, and that in turn is plugged into a sort of back end for archivum, for storage. But there are opportunities to do some kind of layering across that, so that we share the same identifiers across our repository system, so that we can pull those out and build those kind of unified profiles, and also look at some of that kind of discovery side. So I think yeah, I think there's definitely scope to see where there are some connections, but I think there's also perhaps some kind of not wanting to dilute the strengths, some of the kind of core strengths of some of the individual services. So it's where we can make those work.
I need to leave. Thank you so much. I hope I see people again.
Thanks, Kirstin.
Thank you, Kirstin. I see we have one more question in the chat that was partly answered, but I'd still maybe like to, looking at the time, possibly as our last question, throw it into the chat with a slightly different spin. So the question that we had was on how far the Eprints setup in Glasgow is actually sort of matching the community code base. I'm simplifying the question a little bit. And it would be really interesting, I think, William, to hear, because you've been using this for so long, one of the great benefits, but also real risks of open source software is that it can be customized. And what I've seen time and time again in universities, and we know this also from some surveys, certainly in the UK, there's a very dedicated member of staff, they pick up open source software, they customize it, everyone's delighted, and then they find out that bringing this back into the core code base either doesn't work, or that member of staff moves on, then the organization is stuck, it can't upgrade without losing the custom functionality. And that can sometimes be a resource constraint. Now, you've been running Eprints for such a long time. How have you managed this overall?
So we've had some of those. I think it's fair to say we've had some of those challenges, and I think it's been useful to see as Eprints itself has evolved, where there is the core code and there's opportunities to extend that through its kind of plugin ecosystem. So you can develop something on the side and then bolt that on. But absolutely, we are very kind of mindful of that, and it's one of the reasons that we're doing a bit more work just now to kind of upgrade it into the latest version of Eprints and look at, and that's an opportunity for us to actually take a step back and look at any of the things that we either need to change or have updated locally. But again, increasingly we've become sensitive to not wanting to make those changes as much to the core, so that the core is done that. And as we've been migrating to the kind of virtual machine environments, that's been a really good opportunity to do some kind of code base spring cleaning and some sort of tidy up to make sure that it is kind of more future proof for going forward. But absolutely, I think that is one of the challenges. But being able to build them almost as kind of extensible plugins works much better, and as a model kind of going forward, that's kind of the approach that sort of Eprints has taken with this idea of a kind of core code base of kind of an Eprint 0, and then you would just bolt onto that the elements that you would need to turn it into a research data repository or a knowledge exchange repository or so on. And we've been doing some work to kind of make sure that we move back in that direction.
Yeah. Thank you, William. One quick word of advice from me before I hand over to Matt. We a while ago ran an open source development project, and the contract for the supplier specified that any developments that they make for us specifically would need to be made available open source, which the supplier did, but they didn't have the capacity at the time to feed it back into the community, so they released the code. But just releasing open source code somewhere, even with the right license, if it isn't actively fed back into the community, may not be as relevant as you think it is. So from sort of own experience, if you work with an external supplier, I would advise writing to the contract that they feed the code back into the community code base. And with that sort of lesson learned from me, I'll quickly hand over to Matt.
Thanks, Torsten. That's much appreciated. I'm going to very briefly just talk about a few events coming up as part of the Digital Shift Forum. So a number of you here today might be aware that this is actually part of a wider series that RLUK has been delivering since October. And we've been delighted to run the last two sessions in collaboration with our German colleagues. The Digital Shift Forum is really there to bring together colleagues working across the academic and research library communities around the world, with colleagues working in museums, galleries, the wider research community, and also the wider information sector, to bring colleagues together to discuss how the digital shift is currently manifesting itself and how it might in the future in relation to library collections, services, operations, and also the expectations of our users. You can see further details around this series on the web links on the screen now. And also all of the previous seminars have been recorded and are available at DSF on demand. This has been a really popular series. It's had now 16 seminars, 30 speakers, and almost 3,500 people have registered to be a part and to participate in these seminars. And REK would like to take this opportunity now to thank all of our speakers who've contributed to this series since October, all of the delegates who've attended and have added to its discussion from almost 60 countries now, so a really international community. And in particular, to thank members of our Digital Shift Working Group chaired by Torsten, and also including William, who have put together the program, have facilitated sessions, and are helping us build a second program. And the full list of colleagues in the working group are available on the REK website. This is the last seminar today of our current series, and our second series will start in September with our first speaker, who is Andrew Cox, Senior Lecturer at the Information School at the University of Sheffield, who will be talking about his findings of a recent major report exploring AI and the academic library. To attend this session, it is free. You don't need to be an RLUK member in order to attend, and details and booking and registration is now open if you follow the link on screen. It's rluk.ac.uk/DSF. So please do join us from September. And on that note, thank you once again to everyone today. Today's seminar has been recorded and should be available by the end of today on the RLUK website. And on that note, I will hand back over to Ewald and Torsten just for the very final comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all our speakers, to the audience. Thank you so much to you, Matt and Mel, in the background for supporting this initiative. It has been a pleasure and a wonderful way of cooperation. I'm still enjoying it very much, and I'm hoping that we will be able to continue this cooperation, this exchange of ideas, views, and knowledge in autumn. And perhaps we will have a chance to continue our online events on specific topics. Last week, we mentioned research comments as one topic that might be of interest. I think we will look at that and talk about it, and then we'll see. So thanks again so much, and yeah, all the best from Hildesheim.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good weekend, and hopefully see you all at future events.